This question of identity is quite a difficult one. It's a fundamental part of our human condition, our human nature. I think if you talk to evolutionary scientists, they will say that our ability to identify with things that don't exist in the physical world, whether that be states or religions or whatever, is what has allowed us as a species to cooperate in very large numbers. So identity is something fundamental to us. But taken to excess, it can also be dangerous. If I think about the politics of my own country and what I've seen over the last 20 or 30 years, whether it's people who are saying, migrants are to blame for the economic problems you're experiencing because they've come to this country and they've taken our jobs, or whether it's nationalism in Scotland arguing that all of Scotland's problems would be solved if only it separated itself from England and Wales, or whether it's Brexiteers saying that all of the problems in British public life could be solved by removing the UK from the European Union. These emotive questions of identity can be very powerful. And one of the things that I wanted to argue to you tonight very strongly is that identity isn't simple. It isn't binary. If I try and think about myself and how I view myself, partly because politically I react against some of the kind of English nationalism that I see in my country at the moment, I think of myself as more British than English, although I'm obviously technically both. And more than either, I think of myself as a Londoner and identify with the city that I am from. Paradoxically, despite being a Londoner, I'm a huge fan of Liverpool Football Club, and that's a big part of my identity, something I inherited from my late father. And I think of myself as a conservative, although sadly a slightly homeless one at the moment in the current context of British politics. So my identity is complicated. It's got a lot of things mixed up in it. When I was growing up, a prominent Conservative politician, Norman Tebbit, formulated a test by which he said we could judge whether people who had come to the UK, whether their loyalty lay with the UK or the country that they or their families had originally come from. And it was his cricket test. It was if you were from India and you'd migrated to the UK, or you were from the Caribbean and you'd migrated to the UK, who did you support in the cricket? And it's a completely false test. My best friend is British Indian. He was born in the UK but of Indian parents. And I think something he said to me about this illustrates my point very powerfully. So he definitely thinks of himself as British but not English, because he sees English as a sort of ethnic identity, whereas he sees British as a sort of national umbrella that everybody can ascribe to. And when it comes to sport, he would support England against India in any sport other than cricket, where he would support India. And I think it's a good story because it illustrates the complexity of identity. And I also want to recall for you, when I was Chief of Staff, there was an occasion when I and one member of the Cabinet had a private dinner with Geoffrey Donaldson and Nigel Dodds. And it was a good occasion because it was one of those things where you could get past the kind of formulaic positions people take in politics and just talk a little bit as human beings. And Geoffrey Donaldson said something that night that really struck me and has stayed with me. And I think when I come to the end of what I have to say is one of the sort of hopes I have for the future. And he was almost talking to himself, but he was musing that he was Irish as well as British, and that maybe he spent too much time emphasising the Britishness and not enough time talking about the Irishness. And so I think that's a powerful thing, that the choices are not necessarily binary. It's possible to feel Irish and not at all British, British and not Irish, or to feel both at the same time.